Hello and welcome to the first ever broadcast of the Lawrie Awards. The Lawries have been a time-honored tradition on my Letterboxd account, where I go through and give out some awards to celebrate that year's achievements in cinema. I'm especially excited to talk about all my favorite movies and some of my least favorites of 2023, which was such an interesting and diverse year for movies. This is why I'm going all out and finally bringing the Lawries to the big screen. Let's get right into the first award. This award has been one of the hardest to narrow down to just 5 nominees. Ryan Gosling stole the show in Barbie. Dominic Sessa and Paul Mescal both gave incredibly heartfelt performances in The Holdovers and All of Us Strangers. Sterling K. Brown brought a really nuanced performance to what otherwise could have been a distinctly unbelievable, over-the-top comedic role in American fiction. But unfortunately, none of these guys made the final cut. Here are the nominees for Best Actor in a Supporting Role. Glenn Howerton's performance in Blackberry is one that's unfortunately been going completely under the radar of most award circuits. Howerton's hilarious performance as Jim Balsley makes a movie that could have been seen as derivative of works like The Big Short into something that stands out. Howerton radiates an alluring sense of confidence while simultaneously dripping out a steady stream of insecurity that makes what otherwise would have been a cartoon character in the hands of a lesser actor come off as very human.
I'm from Waterloo, where the vampires hang out!
Robert Downey Jr.'s award season sweep certainly isn't unwarranted, and I'll be happy when he's awarded his well-deserved Oscar. From just a simple smirk, Downey is able to communicate subtle and unscripted details of Strauss's personality, and his nuanced performance is incredibly refreshing coming off of his long MCU run.
I know. J. Robert Oppenheimer, if he could do it all over, he'd do it all the same.
But RDJ wasn't the only MCU actor to have a career-defining performance in 2023. Mark Ruffalo's performance in Poor Things was a breath of fresh air. Ruffalo is a great actor, but I've never seen him truly lose himself in a role. That wasn't until I saw Poor Things and watched as he completely transformed into the role of Duncan Wedderburn.
Oh.
Child acting is notoriously terrible, and Milo Machado Gardner was given an impossible task of not just delivering an incredibly emotionally taxing performance, but also carrying the emotional weight of the entire story of Anatomy of a Fall. If his performance didn't work, the whole movie didn't work, but Milo was able to pull it off.
C'est-à-dire, j'ai pas vraiment de souvenirs de disputes. Puis quand il commence à se crier dessus, à se reprocher des trucs, moi je préfère m'en aller.
His desperate attempt to understand the loss of his father hit me right in my soul, and in any other year he'd probably win this award if it wasn't for Charles Melton's performance in May December is the best performance of any actor in any movie all year. Previously, I only knew this guy from the CW's Riverdale, which isn't a show known for its award-winning acting performances.
That means you haven't known the triumphs and defeats, the epic highs and lows of high school football.
The amount of real human pain and suffering and growth that Melton is able to portray, mostly in the background of an over-the-top, campy melodrama, elevates this movie to masterpiece status, and that's why he's the winner for Best Actor in a Supporting Role.
I think I didn't know what a big deal it was in a way because, but anyway.
This year's adapted screenplay category was also very difficult to narrow down to just 5 nominees. American Fiction, Poor Things, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and The Zone of Interest could have all ended up on this list, but unfortunately didn't make the cut. There's been some controversy over categorizing Barbie's screenplay as adapted or original, but unfortunately, either way, it was unable to beat out these 5 nominees. Andrew High was able to take the book All of Us Strangers and turn it into a deeply personal reflection of his own life. The story draws you in with incredibly well-rounded characters and deliberately plants confusion and curiosity in the mind of the viewer. In the end, when every question and concern is answered or addressed, you can't help but feel your heart has been torn to shreds. As previously mentioned, Matt Johnson's script for Blackberry has the chance to feel derivative of other similar movies like The Big Short, but it's able to interject extremely engaging and human characters into the witty comedic story. Not to mention, the jokes really land. This was probably the funniest comedy of the year. Christopher Nolan's screenplay for Oppenheimer being written entirely in the first person is arguably more interesting than the actual movie itself. This one challenge to the form alone could earn it a nomination, but the narrative is also perfectly paced out and presents information throughout the intertwining timelines in typical Nolan fashion, proving yet again that he is the master of non-linear storytelling. Phil Lord, Chris Miller, and Dave Callahan's script for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is the pinnacle of comic book movie storytelling. Action-packed, hilarious, and emotionally devastating all at the same time. Across the Spider-Verse takes everything great about the first movie and elevates it even further. All of the characters are so intricately fleshed out and complex that I can imagine a movie starring any one of them as a protagonist to be just as amazing as this one. Haters will say, well, it ends on a cliffhanger, so therefore it can't be a good standalone story, but I really don't think this is the case. Every character has an emotionally resonant arc and goes on a deeply fulfilling journey over the course of the plot. Even though there's still more story to tell, I'm just grateful that we were able to get this chapter in Miles' story. I can't wait to see what work will be done in Beyond the Spider-Verse. I love each of these scripts, but the clear winner is Eric Roth and Martin Scorsese's script for Killers of the Flower Moon. There's been a lot of discourse around the decision to center the movie on Ernest and Hale, but I think that the film does an excellent job grappling with this decision throughout the course of the story. The final scene is literally Martin Scorsese talking directly to the audience and pointing out how the horrific tragedies experienced by real people are often transformed into mass entertainment, often created for and by the white majority. There is a level of respect and care put into crafting this important story which radiates through every scene, making Killers of the Flower Moon one of the most powerful stories of the year and the winner for Best Adapted Screenplay. Okay, 2 big awards out of the way. Now we're going to hand out some technical awards, starting with Best Makeup, Hairstyling, and Costume Design. Ideally, I'd break this award up into 3 separate categories, but when breaking it down, these awards all basically have the same nominees and the same winner. So I'm clumping it all into one award and adding an extra 6 nomination. If you don't like that, make your own award show. Here are the nominees. Wes Anderson's films predominantly feature dry, witty acting, so a lot of the personality in his characters shines through in the makeup, hairstyling, and costume design. Asteroid City is certainly no exception, with its huge cast of wildly different characters. What the team is able to pull off is truly impressive. It wouldn't be Barbie without big hair, crazy makeup, and colorful costumes, and the team at Barbie definitely didn't phone it in. The unique world of Beau is Afraid owes a lot to its hair, makeup, and costuming teams, as the film charts through a variety of different worlds, changing aesthetics at a whim, while also keeping a unified voice. Saltburn has been often criticized for being style over substance, and though I don't really agree, Saltburn is indeed a visual treat, and its hair, makeup, and costume design are definitely a big contributor. Talk to Me's possession effects and demon design still haunt me to this day, elevating the horror of an already expertly crafted film even higher. But the winner is definitely Poor Things for its memorable, inventive prosthetics and costumes that pack as much personality into each character as the A-list cast. With movies like the literal time machine of a film that was The Holdovers, to the decade-spanning crime thriller of Killers of the Flower Moon, to the sci-fi world of The Creator, in terms of production design, this year has been one of the most inventive and immersive ever, and it was nearly impossible to narrow it down to just 5 nominees. But here they are. Anatomy of a Fall is one of the most captivating murder mysteries ever put to film, in large part thanks to the naturalistic set design that makes the mystery feel incredibly grounded. As investigators pore over every detail of the house, you never feel like it was constructed as a set for the mystery to play out in. The house feels lived in and real. Beau is Afraid is a film that is filled with distinct aesthetic worlds that Beau travels through, and each realm manages to capture a unique look while also maintaining a cohesive feel throughout the impressive 3-hour runtime. Poor Things is able to create some of the most beautifully constructed sets, giving Bella and the audience a world that you can't help but want to explore every part of. Many of the scenes in the zone of interest are simply just characters running through different rooms, gardens, and roads, and yet it still manages to be endlessly captivating through its contrast and connection to the horrific real-world events that lay in the background of every scene. The film was actually shot on site where these tragedies took place, which can be felt through the authenticity of each scene. But the winner has to be the film that caused a global pink paint shortage and brought the world of Barbie Land to life. Barbie could have simply built some big dollhouses and called it a day, but the film was able to capture a distinct aesthetic voice and create one of the most aesthetically iconic films ever put to screen. The Best Supporting Actress category has also been a hard one to nail down this year. Unlike the rest of the acting categories, none of these performances particularly spoke to me, and there really isn't a clear frontrunner. That isn't to say none of these performances aren't quality. I just feel like a strong case could be made that any of these 5 women deserve the award. Here are the nominees. The only thing I can remember seeing Amy Ryan in before Beau is Afraid is The Office and Beautiful Boy. In both of those, she gave a decent enough performance, but certainly none that I'd consider award-worthy. Beau is Afraid gave her such a fun and complex part that really elevated her status as an actress. She has a presence in the film that draws you in, and she brings a lot of heart and sincerity to the role. She comes in at a point in the film that needed the emotional grounding of her solid performance, and she steals the show in every scene that she's in.
This is a room in our house, but it's your home for as long as you need. My name's Grace.
I've always known Anne Hathaway is a good actress, but in Eileen, she absolutely steals the show. The wine opening scene alone gets her the nomination here.
I can play music as loud as I want to. I can I can scream as loud as I want to.
Rosamund Pike was hilarious and heartbreaking at the same time in Saltburn. She brings a lot of complexity to what could have been a really shallow role in the hands of a lesser actress, and I was really impressed by her work.
Oh, bliss. Bliss, bliss, bliss.
Divine Joy Randolph's work in The Holdovers has understandably won over the hearts of every award show voter, and for good reason. She brings home a lot of heavy emotional moments with a lot of heart and sincerity.
I heard you got stuck with babysitting duty this year. How'd you manage that?
I definitely understand the hype around the performance. I just had a bit of trouble connecting to her in some of the more mundane scenes, and for me, if I had to pick a person to take home this award, it would be Danielle Brooks in her performance in The Color Purple. I had my problems with The Color Purple's movie musical adaptation, but one thing that can't be said about the movie is that it had bad performances, and Danielle Brooks is the shining example of star power on display in this film. Her character does some rather questionable stuff throughout the narrative that I personally feel undercuts a lot of the messaging of the movie, but Danielle Brooks is so likable and does such a good job that it's easy to understand why everyone in the movie loves her. It's a performance so good that it makes up for some questionable writing around the character and wins her the award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role.
But if a man raise his hand, hell no.
Time for some more technical awards, starting with sound design. Here are the nominees. In capturing the look and feel of the 1970s, I think one of the most effective ways The Holdovers works is through how they captured the audio.
Sir, I don't understand.
That's glaringly apparent.
I can't fail this class.
Oh, don't sell yourself short, Mr. Coates. I truly believe that you can.
David Fincher's The Killer was unfortunately released directly to Netflix, and it makes me really upset that I was never able to listen to the sound mixing in a theater. The fight scene in Florida is a masterclass in sound design. They chose to remove a lot of the grunting heard in typical action sequences and instead emphasize the impact made by each hit, which makes the whole sequence so much more kinetic and engaging. Oppenheimer is definitely over the top in the best way possible. Just watch the scene where they drop the bomb or when Oppenheimer gives the victory speech to the room full of scientists and you'll understand why it was nominated here.
I just wish we had it in time to use against the Germans.
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a movie that I'm conflicted to nominate here, as it's the only movie that had a re-release primarily to fix the sound mixing. I've seen both versions in theaters, and personally, I agree with writer and producer of the film Phil Lord when he said, "The movie mix is really dynamic and comfortable at full volume, but some theaters were playing the film too quietly, adjusting the audio to the opening music, which is supposed to be played very loud. Because of this, the rest of the movie was too quiet for a lot of audiences, causing Sony to remix the entire film and re-release it. I think the new mix is fine, it's just unfortunate that a lot of audiences were unable to hear the film the way it was meant to, but all the impressive sound design still certainly warrants a nomination for this award."
Let's do things differently this time. Like, so differently.
All four of these movies were incredible technical achievements in sound, but it was the Zone of Interest that was able to turn its soundscape into a profoundly artful experience in and of itself. The soundscape of this movie tells a completely different story than what is happening on screen, but that contradiction is the very core of the film and delivers the central theme of how much suffering are you willing to ignore for your own comfort in a way that can only be conveyed through the medium of sound design. No other movie comes close. In a year dominated by rushed and exploitative VFX work to the point where the industry is finally starting to unionize, it's easy to focus solely on the atrocious visuals of movies like The Flash and Ant-Man, but what should really be celebrated is the work that was done this year by many truly visionary talents. Here are the nominees. The Creator, on a budget of $80 million, looks better than the vast majority of movies that came out this year, with double and even triple its budget. The impressively immersive world building is shown through the spectacular VFX, and the design for the robots and humanoid AI is shockingly lifelike. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 had some of the most expressive and believable creature work ever rendered in a computer. Rocket is the emotional core of the film, and the team at Weta FX made every moment he was on screen just work. Typically, you don't think of visual effects when watching animated movies, but the work all the animators and modelers did on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse deserves an incredible amount of praise for setting a gold standard for what's possible with VFX, even when they had to also overcome poor working conditions and mistreatment. I already talked about Talk to Me's incredible use of practical character designs through its use of practical hair and makeup, but its CGI blends beautifully with the practical effects to deliver some of the scariest looking demons ever put to screen. But again, only one movie can take home the prize, and for me, the award for Best VFX has got to go to the team at Godzilla -1. Look at these effects and guess how much the budget of the movie is. The US Godzilla movies cost around $150 million each. Maybe at the lowest end you'd think Godzilla -1 would cost $50 million, but no. It was made on a budget of $10 million and is somehow able to look better than the vast majority of films coming out of Hollywood. This is in large part thanks to director Takashi Yamazaki, whose background in special effects allowed him to make the most of the limited budget they had and deliver a visually stunning cinematic experience.
Editing as an art form is one that goes quite underappreciated in award circuits. Often movies like Oppenheimer with its flashy intercutting between multiple scenes at once is seen as the best simply because it's doing the most. But in actuality, an over-reliance on editing tends to take away from potentially poignant moments, whereas a skillful editor tends to enhance and feature the most important aspects of the film to their fullest effects. Sometimes the best editing feels completely natural and therefore goes entirely unnoticed. Here are the nominees that use the art form to elevate the stories that they tell. With only 2 primary locations, in the house and the courtroom, Anatomy of a Fall has the potential to feel quite stale, but editor Laurent Sénéchal was able to interject an electric pacing into each scene that makes every quick-witted exchange between lawyers or meticulous crime scene examination an exciting watch. Beau is Afraid is an anxiety attack on screen, and so much of that chaotic energy is captured so well by editor Lucien Johnston. Through the edit of May-December alone, the film is able to capture a unique melodramatic tone. The film's pastiche of material like reality TV and soap operas sets the stage for the narrative's deconstruction of performativity. It all comes together when the smoke and mirrors unravel and the film is able to settle on the horror of the situation, and a lot of that hits especially well thanks to editors Alfonso Gonçalves and Chris Tensis.
I don't think we have enough hot dogs.
The zone of interest is particularly striking through its editing choices. In a movie that focuses so much on the mundane, each cut by editor Paul Watts feels so specific and draws you into each and every scene. But the winner has got to be the GOAT herself, Thelma Schumacher, for her work on Killers of the Flower Moon. This transition alone should end the conversation.
Right down this road.
But it isn't just the flashiness. Thelma's manipulation of the rhythm and pacing of a nearly 4-hour movie demonstrates her mastery of editing and wins her this year's award. I've been trying to keep these categories down to 5 nominees, but it was literally impossible to do that with this year's cinematography. I had a hard enough time narrowing it down to just 6, knocking off films like The Creator, which was somehow shot on a Sony FX3 and looked like that. The Killers of the Flower Moon, All of Us Strangers, The Holdovers, and Asteroid City could have all easily made it onto this list, and it was terrible having to knock them out. But I think this list of 6 is the best of what 2023 had to offer. Here are the nominees. Simon Beaufil's cinematography on Anatomy of a Fall had some of the most effective moments of pure visual storytelling this year. When Sandra's on the stand and she has to answer questions about her marriage, the simple but iconic framing of her on the stand with her son watching in the foreground lets the audience know exactly what's running through her mind in that moment. The use of color is also extremely effective in this film. The contrast between the white snow and the rest of the characters is visually striking and memorable. I can't pronounce his name for the life of me, and I also do not envy Paul Pogorzelski, who had the task of bringing to life the many worlds of Beau is Afraid and capture them on camera. But wow, did he do the job. The framing, the use of color, the lighting, and even simple decisions like the lens choice all work together perfectly to create a visual language of communicating Beau's anxiety. Even in the most calm moments, something always feels a little off, and when everything flies off the handle, Pogorzelski is able to incredibly capture the madness. To this day, I cannot get the shots of Riley trapped in hell out of my mind. It was some of the most horrific imagery ever put to screen. Not only is Aaron McCliskey's cinematography on Talk to Me able to scare, but it's also able to excite, having some of the most dynamic and creative camera moves in a horror movie since Sam Raimi. The world that Robbie Ryan is able to capture in Poor Things is absolutely mesmerizing. Poor Things is one of the most visually unique movies released in a while. I know the fisheye lens is controversial, at least in the circles I run in, but I found that he was able to masterfully use the medium to create an incredibly engaging composition. Lucas Salt is perfectly able to capture the horror of the zone of interest in a way that doesn't feel over the top or ham-fisted. The visuals here have lingered with me long after leaving the theater in a way no other movie was able to do this year. But only one movie this year was able to capture the scale and majesty of the atomic bomb and the burden of power for the people who wield it. Director Christopher Nolan wanted to capture as much as they could with minimal use of CGI, leading every explosion and molecular sequence being taped onto real film. Oppenheimer is truly one of the most visually stunning movies ever constructed. Seeing this in 70mm IMAX was a religious experience. DP Hoyte van Hoytema easily takes home the prize for Best Cinematography. This award show is supposed to be a celebration of movies, but a lot of the movies I go see are typically quite bad. Most of the time I don't really care if a movie I see is bad, as I think there's always something I can take away from almost every experience in a theater. But these 5 movies are the movies that disappointed me the most this year and made me question why I even saw them. Here are the nominees for biggest disappointment. Hyped up by filmmakers I really respect like James Gunn, The Flash was marketed as the greatest superhero movie ever made. Even Tom Cruise was singing its praises. Obviously, the PR around Ezra Miller was a nightmare. The film had been in development hell for ages, and the trailers were not looking too promising. But The Flash is maybe my favorite superhero, and was my favorite part of the terrible Justice League films, so I had some hope for this movie. Unfortunately, though, the whole thing seemed like a marketing gimmick, a desperate attempt to try and generate positive hype around the garbage fire that was this movie. Like everyone else on the planet, I love the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, and though I was skeptical of Disney taking over and not having Spielberg behind the camera, I thought that James Mangold seemed to be the perfect pick to carry on the franchise. Unfortunately, in the end, we got a bloated CGI-filled mess that failed to capture any spirit of the originals. Mr. Robot is one of my favorite television shows ever made. I saw it at a very formative time in my life, and it has really stuck with me. Seeing that showrunner Sam Esmail was tapped by the Obamas to create another thriller about the dangers of computers was incredibly exciting to me. But unfortunately, the end result was a messy film with muddled themes that failed to replicate any of the Mr. Robot magic, and instead felt closer to one of M. Night Shyamalan's recent works. These days, Ridley Scott's filmography has been incredibly hit or miss. He's either putting out the best movie you've ever seen or the worst. With the star power of Joaquin Phoenix and Vanessa Kirby, I was hoping that Napoleon would be the former. What we got instead was a 3-hour, tonally inconsistent mess that had no idea what story it wanted to tell. But for me, no movie left my mouth open on the floor, dumbfounded in disbelief that something of this low quality could possibly be produced, like A24's Dream Scenario. I was pretty engaged with the first half, as the movie explored the idea of modern post-social media celebrity through the wacky sci-fi premise. It was generally funny, and I was enjoying a classically bizarre Nicolas Cage performance until the scene happens, and if you've seen the movie, you know what scene I'm talking about. It was uncomfortable and shocking, and I was excited to see where the movie would go after taking such a bold risk. But then the narrative completely shifts, and for some reason turns into a movie about how oppressed the white man is for simply existing, and how annoying, woke SJW snowflakes are ruining their lives. The movie went from feeling like a thoughtful analysis of today's culture to feeling like a skit you'd see on Gutfeld. Additionally, what sucks is that not only did A24 produce this, but the beloved director of Hereditary, Midsommar, and Beau is Afraid, Ari Aster, was an executive producer on the film. Dream Scenario is embarrassing for everyone involved, and this year's winner for biggest disappointment. But every disappointment comes with big surprises, and this year had its fair share of shockingly memorable cinematic experiences. Here are the nominees. Eileen was a movie that I had not seen any trailers or promotional material for. I hadn't even read the synopsis. All I knew going in was that it starred Tommaso McKenzie and Anne Hathaway, and that Anne was getting some Oscar buzz for her performance. As the movie began, I was instantly pulled into the world of Eileen and at the edge of my seat as the plot transpired. Going into this movie completely blind was an absolute treat. May December was another movie that I hadn't heard much from. It was getting generally good reviews, but I was not expecting to be as floored as I was. Seeing that A24 distributed a horror movie directed by the guys who used to make Vines with Logan Paul definitely sparked my interest, but I didn't anticipate seeing Talk to Me, one of the most technically inventive horror movies of the last decade brought to screen. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem was a movie that I was expecting to be nothing more than a Spider-Verse ripoff, but I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of passion and heart that oozed from every frame of this film. The voice cast elevated the material past the regular script and really brought their A-game.
But in a year filled with some of the most boring and uninventive superhero movies ever made, the movie that surprised me the most was Blue Beetle. Sure, Blue Beetle doesn't reinvent the wheel when it comes to its plot. It's generally quite derivative of every superhero origin that has come out before it. But what elevates Blue Beetle for me are its characters that are handled with such loving care. All the performances here are superb. The family have great chemistry and the story gives them a lot of time to shine. Visually too, I thought this movie was quite surprising. It interjected a lot of color and life into a franchise that desperately needed it. Unfortunately, whether due to the strikes or just a lack of appetite for a new DC property, Blue Beetle wasn't able to find its audience, but I still hope we get to see more from the Reyes down the line. Musically, this year was really solid, with music icons taking their first foray into composing for the screen and longtime greats releasing some of their best work. Here are the nominees for Best Score. Mark Ronson's infectious pop instrumentals perfectly captured the tone of Barbie Land. The second the first trailer dropped and I heard those synthy strings, I knew that this movie was going to be something special. Barbie will be remembered for its iconic musical numbers like I'm Just Ken, What Was I Made For, and Dance the Night Away, but Mark Ronson's score deserves to be celebrated just as much. Joe Hisashi's simple but evocative melodies that play throughout The Boy and the Heron are awe-inspiring. This is probably the soundtrack I have revisited most when I'm studying and want to play some peaceful music in the background. One moment it sends you into a relaxing dreamlike trance, and the next it fills you with so much hope, inspiration, and heartbreak all at the same time. Everything Ludwig Göransson touches turns to gold, and his score for Oppenheimer is no exception. I think one of the biggest problems with Oppenheimer is that the film relies too heavily on the score to keep the audience engaged, but I mean, how can you hear what Ludwig cooked up for this movie and not use it to its fullest extent? Jarskin Fendrick's score for Poor Things is just as out there as the movie itself, and as it draws you in by the strange distorted violin strings, you can't help but be moved by it. The winner without a doubt has got to be Daniel Pemberton's score for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which packs just as much excitement, action, and personality into any visual sequence in the movie. The way that different themes blend together on the final track still sends chills down my spine. A lot of animated movies just slipped past my radar this year, so the nominees here are far from a comprehensive list of the best. I'm only nominating 4 movies for this award, as I've only seen 5 animated features of the year 2023, and I refuse to nominate the Super Mario Bros. Movie for any award with the word best in the title. Here are the 4 nominees. Elemental has received a lot of hate from people in my circles, but I found the film to be quite charming. Sure, it's not as quality as other Pixar movies, but I'd be lying to you if I said the ending didn't move me. As previously mentioned, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem was a pleasant surprise this year. I adored the disgusting character designs. Like, these guys are ugly, but in an aesthetically cool and intriguing manner. Additionally, the animation and action are both stellar. But like every other award show this year, the only 2 nominees that matter in the Best Animated Feature category are The Boy and the Heron and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I like The Boy and the Heron, and if the film had been released without any of Miyazaki's past work behind it, I would think it was one of the most refreshing animated movies ever made. Unfortunately for the film, I couldn't help but compare it to all of his past work and feel that it was missing something. I want to adore this film with everyone else. There's clearly a lot of care put into it by a skilled team of animators and a visionary filmmaker at the helm, but it failed to really get me as excited as the winner of this award. Simply put, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a masterpiece. The team of animators were able to juggle so many different styles and blend them into one unified experience that all culminated into a movie that feels like an electric explosion. Every frame of this film could be hung in the Louvre. I mean, look at this. And this. This. And this. Absolutely incredible work. This year was filled with longtime established filmmakers delivering some of the best work of their careers. Because of this, I think it's important to highlight the new voices and up-and-coming directors with an award for Best Directorial Debut. Here are the nominees. Cord Jefferson's debut, writing and directing American Fiction, has earned him a lot of deserved recognition. The film is definitely a movie directed by a writer, but the performances that he was able to get out of his cast make what would otherwise be some rather dull visuals engaging to watch. Celine Song's Past Lives is a very, very strong directorial debut. Everyone in the world seems to have adored this movie, and while I can certainly appreciate the dazzling visuals and stellar lead performances, I personally had a really hard time believing any of the characters. I know I'm certainly in the minority here, and if this movie moved you, I'm happy for you. Regardless of how I feel, it's undeniable that Past Lives is an impressive debut from Celine Song. Rain Allen Miller's directorial debut, Rye Lane, was such a fun movie. Teaming with creativity, Miller is able to make the most of the limited budget and deliver one of the most fun movies of the year.
Molly Gordon and Nick Lieberman's work on Theater Camp is an impressive debut. With a cast of predominantly young kids, the two did a good job capturing some great performances and delivering a movie with some solid comedic moments. The most impressive debut of the year has to be Michael and Danny Filippo and their work on Talk to Me. Talk to Me is the most terrified I've been in a movie theater, and these two's creative vision shine through in every moment. I can't wait to see what they do next. Before we get into the major awards of the night, it's time to be negative once again and talk about the worst movies of 2023. Multi-million-dollar superhero movies had a pretty tough year. From terribly rushed CGI to made-by-committee, barely cobbled-together screenplays, The Flash, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and The Marvels all earned themselves nominations on this list. Flamin' Hot was a soulless corporate biopic released directly to streaming that I probably wouldn't have spent another second thinking about if I hadn't found out that the true story the movie is based on was completely fabricated and made up. At least Air had the decency to tell a true story. What was even the point of this? While all of these movies are painfully bad, there was only one movie I saw this year that I would consider sinisterly evil. I really don't have enough time to dive into all the heinous things that went on behind the scenes of Sound of Freedom or the true story that inspired it. I'll put a link in the description to a whole breakdown of the events, but let's just say when you market your movie as the movie that will end child sex trafficking and multiple producers are caught kidnapping children and groping the children who are being sex trafficked, let's just say you've earned yourself the award for worst movie of 2023. This was another incredibly difficult award to narrow down to just 5 nominees. Movies like Oppenheimer, Asteroid City, The Iron Claw, and The Zone of Interest all could have had a spot on this list. I really wanted to include the Guardians cast here for their great final hurrah, and I mean, Beau is Afraid had some of the best performances from one-line characters in any movie I've ever seen. But alas, tough decisions had to be made. Here are the nominees. It's sometimes hard to appreciate acting that's being done in another language, as you can miss a lot of the subtlety that's being communicated through a language you don't fully understand. But the cast of Anatomy of a Fall execute each performance impeccably. Even one-off lawyer characters feel natural and human, but still purposeful in their position in the story. The cast of The Color Purple made the movie for me. Everyone is perfectly casted here and deliver top-notch vocal performances while also nailing all the emotional beats. Killers of the Flower Moon pairs industry giants with relatively unknown actors, and still every performance is memorable regardless of who's delivering the lines. As the narrative unfolds and the more and more characters keep being introduced, the cast does an excellent job making sure that each person stays recognizable. The cast of Saltburn all share an electric chemistry. The exciting young cast show off their impressive range as they lure you into the world of Saltburn, lounging about the decadent house in energetic and exciting montages before switching on a dime to acting in intense scenes. Even background characters who don't stick around in the story for very long stay memorable. But the winner would have to be the young up-and-coming cast of Talk to Me. I really believed every performance here. They all shared such a strong chemistry on screen that I wish I could have been there on set when the cameras were off. You can feel they all had a blast making this movie, and we as an audience get to experience just a bit of the fun watching them work. This may be controversial, but Paul Giamatti didn't make the cut. It feels like he should be here, but for me, I just didn't think his performance was at the same level as the other 5 nominees. I love the guy and thought his performance in The Holdovers was great, but can you even tell me what his character's name was? I found that he didn't lose himself enough for my taste, and unfortunately there can only ever be 5 nominees for each award, so without further ado, here are those nominees. The level of vulnerability that Adam Scott is able to bring to every role sets him apart as one of the best working actors today. It's truly shocking that All of Us Strangers is one of his first big leading roles in a movie, but wow does he meet and exceed expectations. Watching as he navigates going from closed off to hesitantly opening up to receding back into a child to fully coming into his own as an adult made for such a powerful leading performance.
I think that's a good idea.
Leonardo DiCaprio has been criminally overlooked for his role in Killers of the Flower Moon. This is definitely one of Leo's less emotionally explosive roles, but he is able to capture such a believable, pathetic nature that you can't help but empathize with the guy in a way that few actors could pull off.
I don't want you near my family. Not no more.
Cillian Murphy is another actor who has had criminally too few leading roles, and seeing him finally work with longtime collaborator Christopher Nolan as the lead in Oppenheimer felt so right. When I left the theater seeing Oppenheimer for the first time, I felt as though narratively the film didn't do enough to showcase the titular character's inner turmoil. On my second rewatch, I was able to appreciate more how much of this was translated through the subtleties in Cillian's performance in ways I wasn't able to fully appreciate at first.
When I came to you with those calculations, we thought we might start a chain reaction that would destroy the entire world.
When Barry Keoghan was cast as the Joker in Matt Reeves' Batman, I was a bit skeptical. After watching Saltburn, I am no longer skeptical. He adds a complex level of humanity to Oliver, which makes you unable to help but root for the guy despite everything he does. He brings so much heart to this role while also being incredibly ruthless. He has a powerful presence but is also completely vulnerable. A really solid lead performance by one of the most interesting actors working today.
So you're picking apart the style, may I say, instead of the substance. That's kind of...
Kind of what?
Lazy.
It almost seems unfair to give this award to Joaquin Phoenix for his portrayal as Beau in Beau is Afraid, but I mean, what choice do I have? For a film that's extremely controversial and elicits a lot of strong emotions, I don't think there's a person alive who would argue that Joaquin doesn't shine in this. I will never not be in awe watching him transform. His performance as Beau is truly one of his best. The way he is able to say so much with just a single expression will never not be impressive. Listening to interviews with him and director Ari Aster really feels like the two have found a director-actor relationship on par with the likes of Brando and Coppola, or Scorsese and De Niro, and I can't wait to see what the two of them cook up together next time.
I'm visiting my mother tomorrow.
I definitely wouldn't change the 5 nominees here, but some honorable mentions include the 2 leads of Bottoms, Tomasa McKenzie and Eileen, and Greta Lee in Past Lives. I enjoyed all of these performances, but they didn't make the cut. Also, no Margot for Barbie, please don't cancel me. Here are the nominees. There's been a lot of talk around Bradley Cooper's performance in Maestro, and he's become the de facto villain of this award season. And unfortunately, this has led a lot of people to ignore the incredible work that Carey Mulligan is doing in this film. She's the emotional core of this movie, and her performance alone is the reason why this movie works as well as it does. The scene where she gets diagnosed with cancer is absolutely gut-wrenching, and she is able to sell every heartbreaking moment with a lot of nuance and care.
It's my own arrogance to think I could survive on what he could give.
I'm excited to see where Sophie Wilde goes after her incredible breakup performance in Talk to Me. For a movie by first-time directors, she makes an incredibly impressive commanding lead, grounding the film's supernatural elements in an environment and world that feels real. I'm a sucker for actors playing actors, and I don't know if anyone has ever done it better than Natalie Portman in May December. Her passion and dedication to the craft of acting and the extent she's willing to go is truly captivating. Is she motivated by fame, for the love of the art? Portman's performance keeps you constantly guessing, leaving the viewer a lot to chew on, but never giving you any concrete answers.
I know you don't have much to compare it to, but let me assure you, it is rare.
Emma Stone is probably my favorite actress, and her performance in Poor Things may be the best work of her entire career. Bella is such a weird and challenging character, but Stone fully commits to the role.
And your sad face makes me discover angry feelings for you.
Watching as she evolves as Bella throughout the duration of the film is truly impressive, and I think that she'd take home this award in any other year if it wasn't for. Killers of the Flower Moon does not work without the lead performance of Lily Gladstone. The second you get a little too invested in the lives of Ernest and William, Gladstone is there to remind you exactly why this narrative is so poignantly horrific. Critics of her performance have said that all she does is lay in bed and cry, and if that's your takeaway from her role in the film, I would maybe get yourself screened for sociopathic tendencies. Gladstone carries herself with such a powerful presence throughout the film and delivers one of the most memorable performances of the year.
What are we?
The award for Best Original Screenplay is always my favorite award at any award show. I'm not the first person to rant about the lack of original stories being made in Hollywood these days, but it's important to celebrate the ones we get. Here are the nominees. Anatomy of a Fall has all of the intrigue as some of the best murder mysteries, but goes above and beyond in giving the audience complex characters that feel human. Justine Triet and Arthur Harar's script dives into topics like gender dynamics and modern marriages and systemic sexism present in law with such depth while also never feeling preachy. The film also has a scarily too real depiction of male insecurity that hits a bit too close to home. Beau is Afraid breaks every rule of storytelling ever taught. There's no 3-act structure. Characters appear and disappear with very little setup or payoff. The conflict is constantly changing and evolving, and the second you start to think you know what's going on, the film throws another curveball. All of this could result in a film that feels overly indulgent and messy, but I found it to be incredibly groundbreaking with a screenplay by Ari Aster that seems to genuinely push the form further. I didn't love The Iron Claw, mainly because I had a difficult time connecting to the lead performances of Efron and McCloneys, which is a shame because the material these guys had to work with was quite good. I knew nothing about the Von Erichs going in, so I was incredibly invested and ultimately heartbroken watching a man destroy his family, unable to get past his own ego. One of the few times I cried in a movie theater this year. Nathan Bryan and Tom Mellia cooked up one of the funniest movies of the year with the script for Rye Lane. The plot is constantly evolving, introducing incredibly memorable character after incredibly memorable character. The situations the two leads find themselves in are constantly entertaining, and the central relationship is a joy to watch unravel. But the clear winner here has to be Sammy Birch's screenplay for May December. May December is a story that draws you in with its unique tone and its interesting characters, but you watch as the over-the-top melodrama of it all slowly strips away, and what you're left with is a horrific tragedy that's been bubbling right under your nose the entire time. It's definitely one of the most unique and interesting critiques on true crime internet culture and our voyeuristic desire to insert ourselves into narratives presented to us by the media. No spoilers, but the final scene of this movie is probably one of the best, most satisfying endings to a movie ever. Okay, my picks here are quite unconventional. No Nolan, no Trite, no Scorsese, no Payne. Out of my 5 nominees, there's only one that overlaps with the Academy. These might be a bit controversial, but please stick with me as I present the nominees for Best Director, starting with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse directing team of Joaquin DeSantos, Justin K. Thompson, and Kemp Powers made a masterpiece. With so many moving parts, it's a miracle that this movie turned out as well as it did, and their direction deserves a lot of praise. Animated movies are often unfairly left out of the conversation for directing awards, as are movies directed by a team of directors. Hollywood likes to romanticize the auteur, the singular voice of one artist that you can point to and say, this guy made the movie. But the truth is, some of the best directors are the ones that can lead a large team while keeping a consistent, unified vision for a film. And these 3 went above and beyond doing just that, and deserve the nomination. This whole show I've been talking about how daring and boundary pushing the filmmaking of Beau is Afraid is, and that's in large part thanks to the mastermind that is Ari Aster. I really don't know how he does it, constantly existing outside of any genre and convention. He is truly a visionary filmmaker, and Beau is Afraid is one of his most daring projects yet. Okay, this one may upset some people, but I'm nominating James Gunn for his work on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In a year where Marvel released Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, The Marvels, and Secret Wars, it's impressive that a movie with this much passion and soul was able to break through a fundamentally broken studio. The Guardians movies have always stood out from the rest of the MCU due to the amount of care and creativity that radiates through every frame of those movies, and Volume 3 was the perfect culmination of all of it. Volume 3 never feels like another Marvel movie. It feels like a James Gunn movie set in the Marvel universe and is able to deliver the feeling of finality not because all the characters get together and punch the bad guy good, but because all of these characters we've spent the past 10 years getting to know seem to be at the logical end of each of their emotional journeys. James handles these characters with such love and care while also delivering one of the most visually striking comic book movies ever made. And to do that for a studio that seems to be allergic to creativity is a testament to his skill as a director, and so he gets a nomination from me. The Zone of Interest is another movie that doesn't follow any conventional filmmaking techniques. From the cinematography to the editing to the sound design, every aspect of this film is pushing boundaries and trying things completely new to deliver one of the most hauntingly memorable cinematic experiences ever put to screen. All of those elements working together that perfectly is a testament to director Jonathan Glazer's unique vision and technical skill. But this year, for me, the winner has got to be Greta Gerwig for her work on Barbie. I really truly do not believe that there is a version of Barbie that works without Greta Gerwig's masterful direction. Sure, Barbie isn't a perfect movie, but it's one of those movies that you watch for the first time and you think, wow, that was really good. Then you sit on it for a bit and start to think more critically and say, well, all the stuff in the real world felt a little flat. The subplot with the Mattel CEOs doesn't really go anywhere. The conflict with the Ken seems to wrap up a little too quickly. But then you watch the movie again and you forget about all of that. It's a movie that you can feel was an absolute joy to make for everyone involved. Margot Robbie has talked about how other productions at the studio they were shooting in would come and hang out on their set just because it was so much fun, and it shines through in every scene of this movie. The tone that Gerwig is able to capture is so specific and unique, and I'm sure attempts will be made to recreate it, but I can't imagine any other filmmaker pulling off an achievement like Barbie. Okay, so here it is. Best Picture. If you've watched this whole thing, thanks for making it to the end. I appreciate you listening to me ramble about movies for this long. But without further ado, here are the nominees for Best Picture and my 5 favorite movies of 2023. What more is there to say about Anatomy of a Fall that hasn't been said already? It's emotionally gripping, a technical masterpiece, and features some of the best performances of the year. It's one of the most captivating murder mysteries ever put to screen and is one of the biggest cinematic achievements of the year. I know Beau is Afraid isn't for everyone, but oh boy is it for me. When I first saw it, I appreciated it for the technical wonder that it was, and I dug everything Ari Aster was trying to say thematically. Since seeing it, I've had a lot of formative life experiences, and I found myself unfortunately resonating more and more with Beau as a character. His guilt speaks to me in ways that are too personal for this video, and honestly, I'm terrified to revisit the film. But it's a film that has stuck with me and has helped me process a lot of my feelings, and what more can you ask for in a piece of art? Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is the most fun I had in a movie theater in 2023. It's a roller coaster of a film both cinematically and emotionally. I recently watched it again in Dolby Cinema format at AMC and felt I was watching it again for the first time. From a technical perspective, it's probably the greatest animated movie ever made, a triumph of a film, and more than deserving of a Best Picture nomination. When the zone of interest ended, I was stumped. It felt like the movie was missing something. There was no drama to latch onto or care about, no overarching character development. Things just happen. In trying to understand exactly what I was missing from this movie, I was able to find the meaning. The conflict of these people's lives is meaningless when placed in front of one of the most horrific atrocities ever committed. Watching as these people try to grapple with the mundane, ignoring the suffering of thousands, all in order to keep a comfortable, normal-seeming life, is so hauntingly captivating and unfortunately incredibly timely in the year 2024. Honestly, it was really difficult to pick a winner for this category. At one point in time, all 4 of these nominees were what I thought would be the winner of this award. I've gone over all of these picks again and again in my head, but if I had to pick one movie to say is the best of 2023, then I would have to give the award for Best Picture to May December. May December is able to capture a tone that I've never seen before in a movie. The story it told is fresh and thought-provoking in ways that I could have never possibly expected. The performances from all of the leads are so layered and complex. I have not stopped thinking about Charles Melton's performance since seeing the film. It's not the most flashy movie on this list, but it's the one that I found to be the most emotionally complex, that has stuck with me the longest, an excellently crafted piece of filmmaking, and my favorite movie of the year. And that's that for this year's Lawrie Awards. 2023 was a really important year for movies. From the strikes to the resounding box office success of Barbenheimer to the seeming decline of soulless IP-driven blockbusters, there seems to be a shift going on in the industry. It seems like there's a real appetite for creative filmmaking by talented filmmakers with distinct voices, and that trend seems to be carrying right over into 2024 with the success of Dune Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. I'm excited to have this new outlet for expressing my thoughts on movies. If you want to hear more from me, I have this whole video gushing about Dune Part 2 and its predecessor that you can check out. I'm also on Letterboxd, where I log every movie I see and keep a running list ranking all the movies of a given year, so consider following me over there. Again, thanks for watching.